According to a new survey, 62% of executives are now using AI to make a majority of their decisions, with 27% of the decisions they're relying on AI to make being around hiring and firing. Terrifying at first glance, but does it mean quite what we think it means? I would argue it does not. I'm Christopher Lind, and this is Future Focused. And this week, we're going to be talking through this new survey data, where it comes from, what we can really take from it, and what it means for us. But before we do, if you find the content that I present helpful and valuable, it would mean the world to me if you would like and subscribe. Share this with somebody who would benefit from this kind of content. And if you feel so inclined, go to buymeacoffee.com/Christopher Lind and say thank you. And if you or your organization are struggling with challenges around tech and people strategy, reach out. This is what I do for a living, and I like to help others navigate these crazy times. Okay, so let's get into it, because that statistic is a bit terrifying, but it's important to understand where it comes from. It's coming from specifically a company called Confluent, which I'll talk a little bit more about here. And it's in this new 2.0 quick thinking report that's designed to help leaders, understand what's going on with data. And in terms of context of this, it came from a 2005 survey of about 200 private sector execs in the UK. So, decent size, relatively small sample size, also coming through a vendor, things to be, considering. Now, my goal here, just so you know, is not to be cynical in this. My goal is not to pick apart this report. In fact, I think there's a lot of really valuable data in it. My goal here is to represent this in the context and nuance that I think it deserves, so that you can understand what some of this data might be telling us and how you can process it. Because I don't believe that vendors are evil when they put stuff like this out there. They believe in the data they present. It obviously helps them tell a story, but they have a goal, as does every leader, which we're going to talk about. And as you think about data and reports and dashboards and all this other stuff, it's really important you understand those goals so that you can put on the right glasses and have the right lenses on, so that information doesn't overly influence your reality. Now, the way I'm going to structure this, there's really 3 different segments I'm going to break this report into. And I am going to pull on some of the data, because I think there is some really good data here. I have a fair amount of my own contextual data that I think validates a lot of what we're seeing. And I think it's important to understand that. I just want to make sure we're recognizing who it is. So the first segment here, and I think this is a really important thing, not just for this report, but it's about thinking about the different lenses that we look through data. So I'm going to take this through the angle of external and internal, because this one in particular, well, who is Confluent? They're a market-leading data streaming platform. Okay, so when they say, hey, leaders are using AI to make decisions, they have a natural bend to say, well, we know that's happening. So based on some of this other data, we need to get them more data. We need to make sure the data is accurate, and we need to get it to them faster. That's the angle that they're presenting it. Do I think that's 100% inherently the right angle? No. Is it an angle and one that should be taken into consideration? Yeah. But you can see how much that's already influencing it just by look at this one statistic at the top here, which also happens to be the center point statistic that they put in the opening infographic, which I'll zoom in here just so you can see this version of it. But 94% of the people surveyed agree that they need a data streaming engineer. If 94% of the people that are part of your survey are validating that specific of a title, I'm surprised 94% of companies that you surveyed even knew what that was, let alone said, yes, whatever that is, we absolutely need it. Now, does that mean we throw out the baby with the bathwater? No, but it does mean that we consider the fact that, okay, so this report is coming from a specific group of people who already agree in large with the perception of what this report is presenting, which is, hey, we're doing this now. We need more data, we need it faster, and we need it to be more accurate. I personally, if we were doing a breakdown of the report, would say, I don't think that's necessarily the right path to take. I think that's extremely dangerous to think that, well, we just need to do that more, which we'll talk about later. But understanding that can help you go, okay, well, now let's talk about some of these things. And that's true of any sort of external report. It doesn't matter if it's coming from a small survey of 2,000 or 200 execs from the UK, or the LinkedIn data I covered several weeks ago that covers the entire globe and all of the world. You need to understand where that information is coming from so that you can interpret it appropriately and also recognize they're on the outside. However, I think it's also extremely important, and this is where it often gets missed, is the same thing is true internally. And we're often easily deceived by the external stuff, but we're maybe a little more skeptical. When somebody sends you a Confluent report, you may be a little quicker to go, well, yeah, but isn't the goal, the last page here, to be like, reach out to us about our data streaming platform? You might be a little more like, well, okay, unless the data already validates what you think. Talk about that later. But internally, the same thing is happening, and our guard tends to be down when that happens. And it's because it's not that the internal data doesn't mean it's objective. Just because it's internal doesn't mean, oh, well, it's our internal data, therefore it doesn't have a bend. And just an example of this, for those of you who don't know, I used to sit on work internally as an HR executive. And one of the things that would regularly happen, we would get reports from different parts of the HR team representing how things were going in different sections. And I particularly remember one instance where a talent acquisition leader brought up a report, the really colorful dashboard, and they were representing the fact that they had, through the process optimization work that they'd been doing, had increased speed to hire by 20%. We were hiring people 20% faster. Okay, that's great on paper. Just like, some of this stuff. Hey, that's great that, 94% of people agree you need a data, whatever, engineer. Okay, fine. Just like this talent acquisition leader. Hey, we've increased speed to hire by 20%. And they celebrate that. Why? Well, because their goal is to get people into the organization quickly and efficiently. So a 20% increase in that is good. I would expect to see that. But as a senior leader, it's also my job. And I remember asking these questions to say, right, but how are they doing when they get here? How is that data showing up? Now, they did not have this data. And that's because the 90-day retention data wasn't necessarily part of their portfolio, because a talent acquisition leader isn't necessarily directly responsible for what happens after the person joins the organization. Does it mean it doesn't matter? No, it absolutely matters. And it was a really important question to ask, because when we actually dug into 90-day retention data, there was a direct correlation from the 20% increase in speed to hire and an increase in drop off, or increase in people leaving within 90 days. Now, does that necessarily mean, oh, we went faster, therefore they're leaving sooner? No, we had to dig into it a little bit, and there were some connections between the two. But if we weren't asking those questions, we would have completely missed that, hey, that's great, we're moving faster to bring people into the organization. However, they're also leaving sooner. Our quality of hire is going down. Now, if we were not thinking through the lens of, okay, this talent acquisition leader has a goal, has an angle, has a thing they're focused on. Their goals are to improve speed to hire. Of course, they're going to present an increase in speed to hire. And that is true in your organization everywhere, which is why it's really important for you to think about what objectives and goals do they have? How does that influence the data they're presenting? Not so that you can shred them and tear them apart, but so that you can look for additional data points to validate and assess, is this telling the complete story? Which brings me to kind of the action that I think all of you can do this week. Something very simple. chances are this week or next week, there's probably an upcoming meeting you have where someone's going to be presenting data. There's probably a pre-read, a PowerPoint, a PDF that's coming out ahead of time, or maybe will be brought up in the meeting and you know it's coming. But before you go into that meeting, spend a minute, think about it. Think about who that person is, what they're responsible for, what are they incentivized to do, and then think through what follow-up questions might you need to ask? What other context might you need to make sure that you're able to make a decision on the full picture based on all the details, not just the information that this person with a specific angle has to bring? And listen, if you're somebody who's presenting that data, I want to be clear. My goal here is not to make senior leaders or the people you're presenting to more difficult. And to senior leaders who listen to this, I'm telling you right now, the goal is not to put that talent acquisition story I shared. My goal there was not at any point did I put the talent acquisition leader under the hot seat and go, what is this information? Why don't you have it? Things like that. My goal was to say, hey, this might be something else that we want to double check on just to make sure that this 20% increase in speed isn't causing unintended consequences. So if it is, we can catch it. The goal is to be a problem solver, to mitigate issues, not to call people out, to do anything like that. And at no point, even when we discovered that, hey, we're seeing a dip in 90-day retention, where we were able to pick up some of the quality of hire had gone down, my goal wasn't to throw this person under the bus. And they knew that. I had a relationship with them and I made sure to approach them separately so that they knew, hey, just so you know, this isn't what I'm trying to do. I just want to make sure that we look into it. And they were thankful for that. So senior leaders, be really careful, because if you do this wrong, it can feel like you're just attacking people. So when I give you this action to do this, don't do it the wrong way, or it may have the unintended consequences of really destroying your culture. But it doesn't change the fact that recognizing this is happening externally and internally, and it is influencing your decisions, is really important. Now, the second piece that I want to talk about is related to some of this data, which is there's this kind of lethal triad is the way I'm kind of framing it up, which is really about this echo chamber. So if you look at it, one of the things in here ties to the fact that they do say that, where is it? No, it's not that one. It's right here. Okay. Not the top blue one, but the teal one. These leaders that were surveyed say that 65 say that they believe AI is making decision-making less collaborative. And I think that that is very much a true thing that I'm seeing contextually in my own work. And I'm just seeing in other data points and research that we've covered here. One of the biggest risks with AI, especially in a world where we just keep trying to go faster, is the fact that we're just moving so fast. We need to, we kind of pull back and we go, we've got AI as a partner. So I'm just going to use AI because also I need to move faster. And so I don't have time to go ask other people. I'm just going to do this myself with AI as my partner. And that report indicates that, which I'm seeing elsewhere. Now, could we sit and argue whether 65% is too high? Is it accurate? Is it too low? I don't think that's the point, but I do think this is a concerning indicator that is in the report that we need to pay attention to. Now, the key here, though, is, and I've already seen this, we've gone through this before when the pandemic started ending, the natural tendency is to say, well, see, that's why we need more in-person meetings. And you could absolutely use this data for that. I think it would be a misrepresentation of it, but you could absolutely use this data and say, 65% of people agree that AI is making decision-making, less collaborative. You know what we should do? We should bring everybody into the office so that all meetings are in person. Let's demand in-person meetings. Okay. That is not the goal that you should walk away with. I would say, if anything, that might actually be counterintuitive, because if people feel like, great, now we're being forced to these meetings all so that we can be collaborating, I think that's a real risk. And the danger is that AI can be designed to be helpful, but it has a way of isolating us and putting us in an echo chamber further away from the people who have the context and detail we need to make decisions. So is there a point in this chart, in that data set, that we should be aware of that I think is validated from other sources, that AI is starting to drive to more isolation in echo chambers? Yes. Yes, I think that is very much the case. But do we make a foolish response by just making a demand that all meetings are in person? I would say that would be a not helpful way of going around it. Now, I think something else that came out of here that I thought was really interesting related to this was right here. They talk about the fact that people are regretting they're regretting their decisions on things like this. And let's see, there was another one. Where is it? I don't remember. Oh, I think it was in here too. Yeah. So on the very bottom, 70% are second guessing their judgment when it conflicts with AI suggestions. This is again something I am seeing rise as people become too over reliant on AI. So before we're talking about how AI has this tendency, and we're seeing it here, it's less collaborative. People are using AI to make a majority of their decisions. Okay, they're isolating. Add to that, they're becoming over reliant on it. They're second guessing their own judgment. Even when an AI report says, here's what it is, and they go, well, that goes against everything I've ever seen and experienced. Not that you should just go, well, my gut tells me this, so I should go with it. But people are trusting in AI while at the same time second guessing their own lived experience because AI is telling them otherwise. That is a dangerous trend for us to be moving towards, that we start to ignore what we know to be true simply because AI tells us otherwise, especially when we consider the fact that one, AI is wrong a lot, and two, it has no context. It is simply presenting data as data. It doesn't understand the context around it. So in isolation, you're now becoming over reliant. Those are two very dangerous ingredients to be mixing into that. Now, I think the other one is actually the one that ties to this regret. People are regretting the decisions they are making with AI, yet they're still doing it. We saw from before that a lot of people are starting to trust AI to make their decisions, even when they know it's not going well and they've acted too quickly and maybe they've rushed things. And now you may justify it with the but, well, I've also regretted waiting too long. Well, sure. Maybe the data is not perfect. And if I had better data, this is where they get their conclusions. Well, if you had better data, you wouldn't have regrets. Maybe, maybe not. And again, 90% of people think, well, if I just have more data, it'll be better. I can tell you from experience, that's not the case. More data, especially in isolation and just the numbers, is not true. Now, more lenses, more contextual lenses combined with data, yes, absolutely. Slowing down actually sometimes improves this kind of stuff. But again, this is another lethal ingredient that is continuing to rise as we think about AI. Is people are going into isolation, they're becoming over reliant on AI, and then even when they know that's happening, they're still doing it. They're acknowledging, I know it's making me go too fast. I'm not collaborating and I'm regretting the decisions I'm making. But, we got to do what we got to do. So we're going to charge forward. And I think that's extremely risky. That's extremely risky with where we are right now. Now, I'm not saying everyone's doing this, but I wanted to bring this piece to everyone's attention because while, yes, we can say this report is influenced by Confluent and they have an angle, I think the data in here still is very much in line with what I'm seeing. And it's something that if you're sitting listening to this, if you really think about it, my guess is maybe you're not giving into it, but you can at least acknowledge and recognize this temptation to do it. The pressure's on. We're all feeling the heat to do more, move faster, be more effective. AI seems to offer up a really easy solution to that. Is it faster to ask AI for the answer than it is to try and pull together a meeting of diverse minds who have different perspectives, who don't all look at things through the exact same lens that you do? Yeah. Is that the right move? No. Can we acknowledge that and then come up with excuses for why we're going to do it anyway? Yes, we do it all the time. We do it all the time. I can't tell you how many times I talk to people and we're talking about, yeah, AI is going this way and all this other stuff. And then it's like, yeah, but aren't you just said you did that? Well, I know, but then, and then here's the excuses why I do. That is a very dangerous triad to have, because the more we isolate from the actual people who have the context, the more over dependent we become on AI. And then the more we know we're doing it, but don't do anything to change it, the more dangerous it becomes. And so I think this report does a really good job indicating some early warning signs. And I think the fact that vendors are saying, hey, the solution is more data, better data, faster data. Well, that's a problem, because that's going to contribute to that third leg of the lethal triad, which is willful ignorance. Yeah, I know it's bad. I know it's not really a good thing, but maybe if we just clean things up, it'll get better. Yeah, or maybe it won't. And you need to stop making excuses for why you're going to do it anyway, which is what leads me to kind of the call out, the action that I think everybody can do in response to this awareness, which is think through this week, over the next couple of weeks, what major decisions do you need to make? Could be for your organization, could be for your professional life, could be for your personal life. And objectively reflect on that. Examine, have you brought in the right people? Have you actually invited the right different perspectives into that process? Or have you brought in anyone at all? If not, stop. Don't just go forward with willful ignorance and go, yeah, I really should. I really should. I know that AI has told me these things, and I know it goes against my better judgment, but, and then you go on with the excuse. Don't give in to that. Actually take the time, slow down intentionally, and say, all right, you know what? I probably should run this by this person. I'm not saying you need to invite the whole world into it. I'm saying be intentional about it. Identify the few people who may see the things you don't see, or may have some context that you don't have. Run your thinking by them and make sure you're actually setting it up where you're not just looking for confirmation bias. Don't frame the question as, hey, this is what we should do, right? Be honest. Be like, listen, this is what I'm thinking through. Here's kind of where my head's at. Here's some of the things that are feeding into that. But I think it's important to get different perspectives. Are there things I'm not thinking of? What other things might I want to be aware of? Actually create space for people to be able to share that, so that you can reduce that 75% of people who are regretting their decision making, who are going, yeah, I did it and I really wish I hadn't have. Don't be in that 75%. Be in the 25% where you feel good about the decisions. And I'm not telling you exactly what that looks like. You know what decisions you need to make. You know the context. You know the risks associated with it. You know who you might need to invite or who you've intentionally been leaving out. But do that. Do that, evaluate it, and then actually take action on it. Don't just shrug it off and move forward. Or these numbers are going to pale in comparison to what they're going to be. Because I can tell you just from some of the research that I've been looking at, these numbers are trending upwards. So this is a snapshot. This is a single report on a small data set from the world that I'm working in and the data and research I'm involved in. I can tell you these numbers are increasing. And I'll be interested to see where things go, and I'll be comparing this as we go. Which takes me to the last point that I think is a really important one when it comes to speed and friction. I understand that Confluent in particular, okay, they're not wrong when they bring this up, that say, hey, look, like decision speed, the speed decisions are being made is increasing exponentially and has over the last 3 years. 92% of people say that. Honestly, I think that's low. I don't know. I've talked to anybody who has said, no, I actually don't really feel like things are moving faster. And even here, the social pressure, 59% feel that a big part of this is their colleagues, their peers are using AI to increase things. So again, we know probably what's contributing to it, and everybody, like I said, I'm surprised 92%. I'd probably peg that at 100, but whatever. Somebody's going to say, no, I think it's the same. But the reality is things are moving faster. And I think that's not necessarily inherently a bad thing. I think sometimes people think The way we resist this is by saying, slow down. I don't think the solution is to say we need to move slower. I think we need to move with the right speed in the right places, which means might there be places we need to slow down? Yes. But might there be places we need to insert strategic friction? Might there be places where we go, this can move faster, but right here, we actually need to strategically add friction to slow things down. Now, AI can actually help you do that. Better, cleaner, faster data can actually help you do that. And that's why my goal here isn't to tear apart Confluence or their report and say, this is dumb. Everybody just needs to slow down and go back to the old ways. No, quite the opposite. I would say the access we have to more, cleaner, better data and AI that can help us process it faster can be a really good thing if it's actually contributing to improving speed in the right places and adding the right kind of strategic friction. Now, to give you an example, I recently was involved with some consulting work. And initially, the goal was we need to upskill. There was a huge executive push to upskill the workforce immediately in XYZ area. And there was going to be this whole suite of training that needed to be built. We could have just rushed forward and said, okay, well, let's use AI. Let's get the data to validate the content of these 50 modules. We'll speed this thing up. We've been directed to do these 50 modules. Well, go grab a bunch of data around these 50 topics. We'll reorganize it. We'll pull it together. We'll churn this stuff out faster. Okay. We could have done that. It would have been a huge mistake. And I know that because what we did instead is we said, listen, we can't just go back and say, we need to slow this down. This executive team had already decided we needed to move forward in this upskilling the workforce immediately. It was a top priority. Great. That was non-negotiable and immediately was not going to be accepted as a pushback of, we're thinking not immediately, but instead more slowly. But what we were able to do is we were able to use AI to build a validation plan. And we were able to quickly pull together a validation plan to say, we hear you. We want to move as quickly as possible. We're going to use AI and all the data that we have access to quickly validate, are these the right 50 modules? And how do we know? What data do we need to be able to pull from this? And we used AI to kind of identify, hey, where are some of these gaps? What are some of the sources that we don't have access to? So we could still go to the stakeholders with a plan very quickly to say, hey, we want to move fast. And we did move fast. Here is this strategic plan for how we're going to do this validation. Don't you agree that before we go build 50 modules on things we aren't even sure are the right things, we should very quickly lay out this very quick execution plan to validate what we think might be true? And if you look at this timeline, assuming we do this, we will be able to move even faster once we validated it. Well, we inserted some strategic friction on that front end. We were able to say, instead of saying we need to slow down and validate this, no, we used AI to very quickly put together the validation plan and get that approved so that it didn't feel like we need to slow down. Instead, it felt like, hey, there's a step we missed, but look how fast we're moving on this step so that we can move faster on this, because we think if we validate this, we'll be able to actually compress the timeline on the development of the plan. And that is exactly what happened. We actually reduced the number of things we needed to focus on. We consolidated things down, and we were able to put together a much more quick execution plan because we were able to prioritize based on the most needed things. So instead of saying we got to hit everybody with all 50 of these all at once that we don't even know need to be done, we're able to say, well, we actually are going to filter this down to these, and here's the priority order we're going to focus on so that we can execute this based on the need of the organization. Okay. Two very different directions. One led to a much more positive outcome. One would have led to faster work that would have ultimately been a giant waste of time. And that's why I think injecting strategic friction is actually a really important step that AI and data and tech can actually help you do a better job of doing. So it doesn't just feel like you're kicking the can down the road, which leads to the third action. You've got projects on your plate right now. And I'm guessing If 92% of people are feeling like everything's speeding up, and I think that's an understatement, you probably are too. And there are probably concerns that you have that this speed may lead to unintended consequences. And if you don't have concerns about it, I bet if you were to ask somebody on one of your teams if they have concerns, someone, if you've created a safe environment for them to bring it up, probably does. And so if you aren't sure where speed might lead to unintended consequences, going back to point one, go ask. Go ask the people before you just go, nah, I don't think we are. Well, check, find out where those are. And then instead of just saying, hey, we need to slow this down, build a plan to say, how can AI or data help us quickly identify strategic friction points? So that we're not just saying slow down, but we're saying, let's move the right speed in the right places. Let's accelerate where we can accelerate by adding strategic friction where we can add strategic friction to ultimately get to a better result. And that's something that you can do this week. You can do it right now. Once I'm done with the podcast, turn it off and go do it. Okay. So is this Confluence report adding any brand new late breaking news to the AI world right now? Not necessarily. I think there's some really valid points in it that are confirming and validating the trajectory we're on and some of the risks that we need to mitigate. But I don't think any of it's new, and I don't think any of it's stuff that can't be mitigated. So I think as you walk away from this, I would just encourage you to remember that whatever data you're consuming, whatever information, wherever it's coming from, no matter how objective someone says they are, even myself, I'd be the first to tell you, hey, I have a goal here. My goal is to make you, if you haven't noticed, I'm trying to get you to insert strategic friction, not become isolated and make data decisions in a vacuum, and, not to be dissuaded and fooled by people's agendas. Okay, well, there you go. Those are my agendas. Okay, that's my goal. So be aware that all the data that you consume has that same thing, and you need to dig into that. Take the time to audit where that's coming from. Ask those questions. Make sure you understand that. The other one is be really careful. AI and all this data and all this access to information we have runs a very high risk of leading us to fall into echo chambers and become extremely isolated from one another. So pause what you're doing, examine where you have those weak points and fortify them. And third, don't just run faster with this stuff. I know that's the pressure right now, but all you're going to end up doing is run faster into bigger mistakes. That's all that's going to happen. So use the technology, use the resources you have to map out some sort of validation plan for where can you insert strategic friction and where can you grease the skids so that you can move forward and get to a better outcome. And if listening to all this, you go, this is a lot, Christopher. This is a lot to take on. I'm not exactly sure where to start. Well, you're not alone. That's how a lot of people feel right now. So if you or your leadership team or your executive team are struggling to balance that speed of AI with the strategic friction to make the right calls, it's the work I do. I said it earlier. Please don't let yourself or your leadership team fall into an echo chamber. Reach out. Let's get to work. We can help each other get through this. With that, I'm Christopher Lind, and this has been Future Focused, and we will see you on the other side.